Tatiana, I've officially appointed you host of this hangout.
Hey everybody, how's it going? It is Monday night here in New Jersey and probably in most places of the world. And I'm very happy to be joined with two of my very good friends, Jeffrey Tucker and Lyn Ulbricht, to give everybody a peek into what's going on with Ross right now and his appeal efforts. There's a lot of activity and I don't know, I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you. So thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you, Lyn, for joining me tonight.
My pleasure.
It's wonderful to see you, and I'm excited about this topic too because we all need an update. Ross needs our support. He needs to know that we're thinking about him, and jail can be prison can be a terrible thing, and he needs to know that we're working on his behalf. So we need to have the details right and understand what's going on in order to further this case along the path of true justice.
Mhm.
Indeed. And Lyn is, of course, going to tell us about that. Lyn and I just got back from Liberty Forum. Jeffrey, unfortunately, you weren't able to make it
No.
this time, but it was a really, really great event, especially Edward Snowden's talk. But there were a lot of great people out there. And Lyn gave a really powerful talk with an update. And I think a lot of the people were in the audience were really moved. So, Lyn, maybe you could tell us a little bit about, your thoughts on how Liberty Forum was and maybe an update on what's going on.
Yeah, I'd like to. Actually, I do want to say something that happened today because it was such an example of the prison system. Ross has been moved to Brooklyn. He was there before, and the way to get visitors is you have to get forms and you send it to the potential visitor, and they send it back, and it goes through this whole bureaucratic, you know, obstacle course. But I I had gotten in there 2 years ago because I never got my paperwork and I was leaving and threw myself on their mercy, and I got a good person, and he said, you're his mother, I'll let you in. So I thought I'd try it again, and it was, no way. And but the catch was, and I asked for a supervisor and all that, and she said no way. And she said, well, there were people to give out those forms last week, and Ross said there absolutely were not. And apparently this happens a lot. But what's the catch-22 is that he can't get the forms to send it for people to fill out so he can get a visitor list, and then they go, well, he doesn't have a visitor list and you're not on it. And this is going round and round. And, I never got the paperwork the first time. I don't know what's going to happen this time. I don't know. I'm going to do something about it, but it's so frustrating. It's like over 6 hours round trip for me to get there. It's way inside Brooklyn. Anyway, I'm pretty frustrated with the prisons, and especially this sort of bureaucracy. It's almost like if you really want to see what the federal government's all about, really, just go to a prison, and this is who they are. So that's my little.
We're not often
Thank
allowed
you,
into the
Jeffrey.
prison. I mean, this is
Pardon
part
me?
of the problem is that unless you're a family or you have special access, you're not really allowed in to even see what goes on.
Well, right. I mean, Tatiana saw some of it, and it's very depressing. And of course, Ross he was hoping I was going to get in, and he just said, well, I'm helpless here. I can't get the papers. No one comes around to give me the papers, but they say they do. And, it was a pretty depressing conversation, to be honest, because he doesn't have any of his books and stuff that's in transit, hopefully. And so he's just kind of, I don't know, he doesn't sound real, I don't blame him, but, he sounds a bit down, and I don't blame him. And kind of he's gotten where he tries to stay really detached because his expectations are now so low. And I hate to see that because he's such a enthusiastic, optimistic, naturally buoyant person, and I can just see it being dampened and dampened and dampened. And I don't think it's permanent or anything, but it's not. It upsets me to see that.
Now, he had some friends where he was before. Does that mean he's separated from his friendships?
Yeah, but he makes friends really easily. Like he said, he's been hanging around because he doesn't have books or anything, and just getting to know the other people. He said there's some nice people there. He said that unit is quite tranquil. It doesn't no violence or anything like that. There's a couple of good things about that prison rather than where he was. It's much more spacious. He was in a really tiny place before. He can go up on the roof anytime he wants. The other place was all scheduled, and he loves being outside. And Tatiana was saying, he had said to her, even a little sliver of sunlight or a little breeze makes so much difference. You know, so yes, that's what happens. They shake things up, and so. Yeah, some of the friends he had made, and especially his cellmate, was pretty upset that he left. Ross is a pretty good cellmate to have, and but again, he's staying detached. He's like, yeah. And I said, well, how's your new cellmate? He's fine. Now, when he first got there, the guy was a problem, and he complained, and they did respond and change him, so that was good. So, you know, it's not horrible. It's just we want to see him, and he wants to see us, and they're making it so difficult. And I'm sure it's not just for us. I know we're not being singled out. This is what they do. So there's no compassion there. It's just bureaucracy, and bureaucracy doesn't bring out the best in people. In fact, it brings out the worst in people, I think.
Do we know why he was moved from the one jail to the other?
Well, they don't tell you, but I'm guessing it's for space. Although one friend of his was moved, and then they moved him back, so I don't really know. But it's supposed to just be temporary for when you're in court and maybe a little while after because it's very, very small. And he said that was kind of getting to him a little bit claustrophobic, and this is more space. So, you know, but I'm guessing that's why they moved it.
You know, I have a question about that. Do you think that it's possible it was because that Liberty Reserve guy was in the same prison as him and they didn't want them to connect? Because Ross had mentioned that in a letter that
well, they moved
there.
several people. They moved several people. So I don't really think, I doubt it, you know. But yeah, he was there. They spoke in the library because they were both in the library, you know, working, Ross on his appeal and that guy on his case. And he's not an American. He wasn't in this country. He was in Costa Rica, actually. And they came, and he wasn't doing anything illegal. According to him, it was the Liberty Reserve. It was kind of like Bitcoin, but it was based on the dollar. I'm not really sure what exactly, but they came and
it was
seized him.
just using blockchain technology to transmit ownership titles to national currencies, essentially.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway,
Nothing.
He's been in there for 2 years. He's been in there for 2 years. He's not even an American. He wasn't in the States.
Yeah. They
just took him. They do that a lot, though. Southern District of New York, that's what they do. And Prebar said in an interview, they said, what's your jurisdiction? He said, the world. This is the Southern District of New York.
I find it really appalling that some random district in New York can find people all over the world and just bring them in, even if they're not American citizens. And there seem to be several cases like that, which is bizarre because it's not just wrong to just go around picking people out of the world that you don't like, because last I checked, despite our title as policemen of the world, this is not officially the role of the United States, but also that taxpayers are, you know, their taxpayer money is being used to cage people that have nothing to do with this country.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah. There was an article, a lawyer put up a photo of the Southern District of New York at a banquet, and he called it the Mafia. They're not like any other district. And they wanted, for instance, Ross was arrested in California. He had nothing to do with New York in any way, but they made sure he was tried in the Southern District of New York. That's who they are. So anyway, I don't know the reason he was moved, but I'm guessing it was space, but I really don't know. They don't tell you anything. I mean, they didn't tell us he was moved. I got a text from a woman I'd gotten to know who was engaged to one of his friends in prison. And she texted me and said, I want to make sure you know, because the next day I was visiting. I was about to get on a train to New York. No one tells you anything. You know, she had found out from another wife, and you know, it's kind of like we help each other. All the people, all the families, we're all very supportive of each other, which is good.
Well, what's appalling, among other things, is that the family is sort of mentally in prison as well. I mean, It's not just the criminal who's getting in trouble, it's also his whole entire family is at the mercy of this bureaucratic, ineffective system. And
well, I mean, there's 2.5 million children in this country who have a parent who is in a cage. 2.5 million.
well,
And just think of the repercussions of that.
absolutely, and think about all of the people that are in prison that don't have somebody who's as great of an advocate as you are for Ross, and I think that
Or they're
that's
not able
commendable.
to be.
And they're
Well, yeah.
exactly,
Well,
they're not even educated enough to try and do that. They just kind of acquiesce to the system because that's what good
Well, they
slaves
don't
are
have a lot of
supposed to
choice.
do. They don't have any choice.
Well-
You know, you can't really fight back. That's the point. There's an illusion of
Right.
freedom, but really, how free are we? Could you maybe tell us about
Let
the
me just
appeal?
say, I feel like I do, but I just want to say I feel like I'm almost speaking for them too when I speak about this, because I know them. I see them with their husband or whoever. I see their children clinging to their fathers and tears leaving, and you're right. They don't. Most of them aren't as educated as I am. They're not as articulate as I can articulate the situation better. And I just feel like I almost have an obligation to them too. Those families. It's just so heartbreaking and so destructive. And everyone in there is nonviolent. I mean, I've stood around with the inmates. We've kind of been in a room where you kind of pass through, and we all ended up in the room together. I felt like I was just at a party or something.
Yeah.
They're very nice, fine. They're not, I don't know what they've done, but it's not violent. And so why can't they put a ankle bracelet GPS on them and let them go home with their family, save us some money, and they could do community service or something? They're not a threat to anyone.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my, I just hate the whole thing. It's awful. And of course, most of it's fueled by the drug war. And now a very large percentage of people in federal prison, maybe state too, I don't know, are nonviolent people.
Sure.
Mostly drug offenders. Anyway.
Tatiana asked, the question about the appeal, because so many of us who have followed this Ross case have been, we've just gotten nothing but bad news, from the very outset here, but there still is some hope of this appeal.
There is, for sure. Yeah, this appeal, it's 2.5 times the length of a normal appeal. They had to get special permission from the court to submit it, and they said they could have put a whole lot more in it, but they couldn't because of space. It's a very powerful document. I think it's really, really good, and really it's not only defending Ross, it's defending all of our protections in this country, because there's so many violations throughout the trial and the sentencing that are brought to light, and very important principles at stake. Suppression of evidence. Those corrupt agents were not allowed to be mentioned to the jury, and then later, all came out. And the defense fought to have them mentioned, but the court shut that down. That is in direct violation of the Brady Rule.
Well, just so that we're clear on what this means, because some people who are listening might not have.
Oh yeah,
familiar with
sorry.
This. But
I'm so immersed in it. I feel like everybody knows.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
But in the Silk Road case, I mean, so you have this.
You're right.
This sort of dark web marketplace, but there were several. I guess you would say agent provocateurs or double agents and people who worked for the feds that were had admin access.
Total admin.
Yeah,
access.
to the Silk Road, and who themselves later, were prosecuted, right, or at least.
Absolutely, they pleaded guilty.
For laundering money and stealing and that sort of thing.
Stealing money.
Yeah.
Stealing over $1 million, but also the point you touched on, they had absolute access, unfettered access to everything on the site. Could change things, could rewrite things, could get into bank account. I mean, they had keys to the kingdom, and how could this not taint the evidence?
Yeah. When it was directly working for the government, but working.
Well, they didn't know. The feds didn't know they were doing this till later. I mean, they didn't know these guys were stealing.
Right.
Until.
But they were assigned by the feds to.
Oh yeah, no, they were federal agents. One's the DEA and one's Secret Service.
Yeah.
They were at the core of the investigation in Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, something also that people may not know is that recently Sean Bridges, the second agent, he was a Secret Service agent, when he was being indicted, so he knew that he was going to get in trouble. He was, of course, on house arrest because, you know, he's a good guy. He belongs on house arrest. Although Ross, even though he was accused of nonviolent crimes, wasn't allowed to post bail, but that's a whole other side point. Sean Bridges tried to secure Social Security numbers and basically an escape route out of the country, and he got busted. Of course, they left him at home. Bad guy. You just stay home. And then he was supposed to report to jail, which he was only given, I believe, 70 months, which compared to Ross's double life plus 40-year sentence is laughable, considering he had the faith of the people, right? I mean, he's getting paid to do a job, and he's basically stealing from the American people and stealing from the criminal organization. Meanwhile, the day before he was supposed to report to jail, they found him trying to run away a second time. And he had 3 foreign bank accounts that they didn't know about, which I'd be very curious to find out what they contained and how he got that evidence past them the first time. He had also stolen several Kevlar vests from the FBI, I guess, I don't know, some government agency, another form of theft. And he was basically planning to leave the country with his wife. And amazingly enough, they actually caught him because I have very little faith in justice in the first place. But the audacity of somebody who is able to do that is just mind-boggling. And then combined with the juxtaposition of Ross, who, you know, wrote me a letter and he says, oh, you know, it looks like they found Sean Bridges trying to run away. And, you know, I feel basically saying I feel bad for him and his wife. You know, he must have been very afraid that he would get shanked in prison. And I was amazed that he had any compassion for this person who very likely framed him and had access to those chat logs and was able to manipulate the evidence to however he wanted. This is somebody who was extorting from people. And Ross, being the kind person and just I just couldn't believe the compassion that he managed to muster for this person who's clearly much more of a criminal than Ross ever was.
Yeah, let me say a couple of things about that. Well, Ross hates to hear about anybody else going to prison, and he's always so happy to hear about other people getting out. He just is. But Sean Bridges, what something our lawyer said about that was that you don't run away like that if you don't have money to go to, generally. And there's a lot of money missing from the Silk Road case, millions of dollars that they have not accounted for between the Silk Road itself and Ross's laptop and all of that. There's still double-digit millions missing. And, you know, who's got that? DPR, perhaps? Another corrupt agent besides these? Because we don't know the extent of the corruption. It was sealed by the government, and then these 2 agents had a huge number of emails that they were not forced to decrypt as part of their plea deal. So the government's keeping it encrypted. And I'm like, why? Why, you know, what are you hiding? What don't you want us to know about the extent of this corruption?
But the more you look at the case, I mean, it definitely seems as if Ross was sort of set up as the fall guy for everything, and the government employees, you know, sort of just, you know, who instigated the whole thing, and, you know, as you say, had complete administrative access, are treated, you know, with kid gloves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ross does not have a criminal mind. That was something that a friend of mine said about him, who knows him really well. She goes, yeah, he just doesn't have a criminal mind. And he'd be very easy to have him trust you, to be set up. He just would be. And so would a lot of us. I mean, you know, if you don't have that kind of mind that's basically criminal, it's easy to take advantage of people.
Well,
he's so young. I mean, he was in his mid-20s, and, you know, it's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to what extent do these kind of you know, odd things that went on in the trial, you know, the suppression of evidence, the manipulation of who testified and who couldn't testify, and all the things that went on. To what extent are those going to impact the decision about appeal, and who makes the decision and why?
Well, this is the appellate court's job, is to look at what happened in the trial and say, was the law upheld or not? Was this correct or was there error? And I think it's extremely strong case that it was error. There's also a lot of error, and in which case they can say, well, we'll have a retrial without the error, you know. And another thing is the laptop investigation, the improper protocol, the warrants being a general warrant, like in the American Revolution, where, and Edward Snowden talked about this too the other day. It's like the Fourth Amendment requires particularity. You have to say, I'm looking for this. I have a warrant for this particular thing. And the government had just a general rummaging through all of Ross's stuff, and that, I mean, digital stuff, laptop, Gmail, Facebook, and they're saying, well, it's digital, so it's not protected by the Fourth Amendment. So this is an extremely important point for the digital age, and actually there's an amicus brief submitted on this point by the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, being joined by EFF, that, and hopefully others, but for sure them, and saying this warrant puts us all at risk, this type of warrant they're using. And so there's other issues even besides what happened at trial. Of course, they used that evidence at trial, so it all kind of, but even one of the agents at the trial admitted they didn't follow the guidelines in that investigation, and I can go on about that, but anyway, there's that question as well. And then of course there's the sentencing, which is so out of proportion to what other drug dealers on Silk Road, who actually sold drugs, which Ross never did, they isn't being accused of doing, got a fraction. And I mean, like, one was 17 months, one was 5 years, biggest drug dealer, biggest cocaine and heroin dealer on the Silk Road. The other one's the biggest drug dealer of all kinds on the Silk Road, 10 years. And I started thinking about it, I'm like, why? And I believe it's because Ross is a political threat. The judge referenced his libertarian writings and beliefs at sentencing and the libertarian philosophy of the site, and she called it extremely dangerous and troubling.
Yeah, she specifically, it was very interesting actually to hear a sort of attack on libertarianism. I remember reading that, and you listen to the judge talk and you feel like you're, you know, in your undergraduate sociology class or something. You know, the demagogue is, you know, railing against people who believe in human liberty. You know, there was that element, and there did seem to be an ideological persecution going on, though the libertarian sort of experimental elements of the site were never allowed to be brought up in trial.
That's correct. Ross's libertarian views were not allowed to be mentioned to the jury. And my theory about that, I don't know why, but my theory is that Ross has always maintained that he created Silk Road for people to experience an open, free marketplace out of government control and involvement. And she claims it was to become a drug kingpin. And I know what he's saying is right, because he's told me before any of this happened, he was passionate about it, and he even created a video game to give people that experience, and he lectured about it at UT Austin and other places around Austin. So he, for a long time, was trying to create that experience for people where they could understand what a free market could really be.
You know, I always had the sense with Ross that, yeah, that it really was an experiment in freedom. Let's see, let's see what happens in an unregulated world where people could actually bypass all the structures of interventionism, and in that way, I mean, what he was doing is not that different from what economists have been doing, I think, at the University of Arizona, and I think there was a Nobel Prize given for experimental economics. You know, an attempt to find out, you know, what do human beings do when they're allowed to be free to trade, except he was conducting this experiment in real time in a way the results could be even more impressive and more valid than you know, on a sort of artificial market, you know, academic marketplace or something like that. So, and you know, instead of prison, he probably should have been given should have been, doing write-ups in the American Economic Journal and so on. And given the Nobel Prize, because we did learn a lot. We learned, a ton. We found out about the absurdity of the drug war, and the possibility of self-ordering systems, and trust-based systems, peer-to-peer exchange, and that sort of thing. So, the results were spectacular, and this is why anybody who's interested in science and truth and freedom needs to be interested in this case, because it's wrong for for somebody who's basically an experimental scientist, to be sent to prison and he did nothing violent to anybody. This is prison for violating regulations, the state, and ideological persecution. And I hope that's part of the appeal.
The ideological persecution. I'm not sure. I don't know about that. I'm not sure it is. They do talk about how the sentence was way out of line in various ways, and talks about that harsh sentencing being actually, against the Sentencing Reform Act that Congress passed. But I don't know that he talked. I can't remember. It's 170 pages, and but the other thing about this appeal, and I think it's so hard to appeal because it's so expensive, and so many people just can't fight for justice for themselves or their loved ones because the system is so costly, it's crushing, and we've had a lot of support, but the bills are continue to be astronomical. We just got one for over $13,000 just to prepare the books and the digital information about the appeal to give the judges. Over $13,000. And so it's just you appeal, of course, because you're fighting for your life, but it's very difficult. The system's set up to make it really hard. The trials aren't I personally have lost all faith in trials, jury trials, and they're advised not to go. 97% of people plead because of that.
Yeah, there was actually a really great article by the Free Thought Project, which has just been putting out a ton of really good content lately, about how 95% of the people in jail, I think, somewhere in that range, are basically never go to trial, and that most trial cases are basically lost. So there's basically a lot less of the original version of justice, and that's sort of changed over the years. Inside the article, they reference back to a different piece where they go through the history of the trial system in the United States, and when they started having much more immigration in the early 1900s, or so
late
that's
19th century probably.
Early 19th century, so 1900 and something. I guess, what is that? Don't the centuries go back like some weird thing? Like the 20th century is the 1900s, and then the 19th century.
That's right.
Anyway,
just give the name of the year.
Whatever. Somewhere in 1900 and something. That's when they started having different. They wanted to take the pressure off of the court system, so they allowed for plea bargains. But now, basically, the prosecutor is in charge, and the prosecutor is incentivized by saying to everybody, "Oh, look at me, I'm so great, I'm tough on crime, look at all these criminals I put away." But a lot of the people aren't even criminals, they just don't have other options. And I think that, even though this case is extremely depressing, we're very lucky to have Lyn kind of going around and talking about it, because I think that this is really putting pressure and bringing attention to a system that has to change. And there are millions of people out there that are suffering because of it. So hopefully, there will be some sort of a shift during the next few years. And there seems to be some popular opinion in that direction as well.
Well, actually, President Obama is actually, it's very interesting to me that very late in his term, he started to feel a personal conviction about the problem of the court system in this country. In his State of the Union address, he actually addressed it, and I have to believe it's sincere. For all the problems that he's caused the country, Very late. Presidents tend to tell the truth, a little bit more of the truth, and they're very late, certainly in their second term. So he's actually drawing attention to this. Unfortunately, none of the existing candidates have a clue about the problem. So it's going to be up to the public to keep.
I think Bernie Sanders does. I mean, I'm not advocating him one way or the other, but he has talked about it.
He does. Yeah, he does. Which is yeah. I've heard him reference it from time to time. So. But people like Cruz and say nothing of Trump, and Rubio and so on. Yeah, very dangerous, and Hillary Clinton. But yeah, Sanders has actually made reference to it. The one Republican who talked about this was Rand Paul. Actually.
Oh yeah, Rand Paul.
Of course, he never got any support within parties. This 170-page appeal, I think, sounds like very interesting reading.
Challenging, but
yeah.
There's a summary too. You can just read the summary and the table of contents and get an idea.
Where can people read this?
Well, we have on freeross.org. We actually have a new website. It's still the same URL, and there's a place called under the case called Documents, and we have a bunch of documents, and the appeal is one of them. The amicus brief, one of the one amicus brief that's there now, is there. And we also break it down. Like there's a section called the appeal that I wrote. I wrote a breakdown of it. So, the main points. So you can, if you don't want to read the whole thing, Brian Dougherty of Reason wrote a very good overview as well, and some other people too. So you don't have to read 170 pages to get the gist of it, and it's really important stuff. It really is. No, and I do see this as a bigger fight. I mean, of course, I'm always going to want to fight for Ross, and that probably keeps me going because I'm so tired. I'm like, but I can't stop. But I do think it's a bigger fight that's really worth having, and we're at a real crossroads in history right now with the law and digital stuff and how that's going to apply to the law, and it's going to impact all of us. What the decisions that are made.
Lyn, we were at Liberty Forum and Edward Snowden answered a question about Ross. Can you kind of go over what that response and what the question was?
Yeah, I think Nick Gillespie was essentially asking him if he thought the NSA was behind the investigation of the Silk Road trial or involved in it, and his first answer was yes, and then he went on to elaborate, and I think at one point, and I have it written down somewhere, but that he said you would be naive to think they weren't. He said is that what you remember, Tatiana?
No, that's absolutely what he said.
Yeah.
I mean, he said it was he felt 100% sure of it. I mean, he thought it was ridiculous to think otherwise.
Right.
And I think he alluded to the fact that parallel construction, which means the government does something shady in order to find out information, and then they basically make up a cover story, is something that's used quite often. So I thought that was really interesting as well. But, he seemed to have, a lot of confidence that is what, in fact, happened here.
Yeah, he seemed quite sure about it. So that was interesting. I mean, I figured it too, but I'm not Edward Snowden to hear him say it was, and our lawyers have addressed that too. But yeah, it was good. It was interesting to hear. I didn't know what he would say, so it was interesting to hear that. It was good.
I'm sorry, Jeffrey. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to ask about the appeal board. I mean, why would we have the expectation that the appeal board would be any more interested in justice and fairness than the original court?
Yeah. Well, I do get the impression that it's luck of the draw on the judges. Some of the judges on that in the appeal court, the 2 have never ever sided for a defendant in their entire career. They always side with the government, which statistically says they're wrong some of the time. But then there's some that have a better record as far as upholding the law and looking at it objectively. And we're just hoping and praying at least one of those is on Ross's panel, because you're right. I mean, a lot depends on the judges. And you can continue to pursue it if they accept your case en banc, which means all 12 judges get to decide. But And there are 3 in the first round, and so if one, it's not an even thing. They can't have a draw. It's going to be a decision. But no, you're right. That's a big concern.
What happens if it doesn't go the way that we want it to go? What's the process like?
Well, and there's a few things that can happen. I mean, they can throw out certain evidence because there was errors in how it was procured. They can uphold the argument of suppression and blocked cross-examination and blocked witnesses and say this was not a fair trial, or the suppression, and we're going to have another trial where those things are not, those things are allowed, that they're not, that we know about the evidence, the jury would know. So that could be the result if we're not happy with, and also Ross's sentence could be changed to, that's the least that could happen. That would be fair, but of course there's other things would be. And so then they go to what's called en banc. If they accept it, they don't have to. And that's all 12 judges hear it and determine it. And then after that, you can go to the Supreme Court. And after that, I guess we can go to the world court, since they seem to be taking a position on things. But yeah, so there's these stages. Of course, all of them cost a fortune and are, difficult. But people do it, and we'll just keep it going as long as we can. But hopefully, they will do the right things.
Well, this is where I think people need to go to freeross.org and read some of the documents, because if you only have a superficial knowledge of it, you might conclude that, well, I think maybe what he did was wonderful, but nonetheless he broke the law. So what do you expect? But when you actually look at the details of the case, that's when you get shocked and you're overwhelmed at the injustice. And presumably, in a country that respects human rights, there should be some basic of fairness and decency when it comes to these courtroom procedures and that sort of thing. And the way in which Ross was railroaded is just completely shocking. I mean, those of us who watched it from the beginning,
Well, it's the court that broke the law, in my opinion.
Right.
It's very, very clearly laid out in the appeal.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not what our founders intended, the way the trial system, the whole justice system and trials are conducted now. And pressuring people to plea, people are pleading to things they didn't do just because they don't think they're going to get a fair shake at trial anyway, and you get a worse sentence if you go to trial and all that. So it's really become distorted. Plus, it's hardly a jury of your peers when, and I'm not criticizing these individuals, but I'm just saying 10 out of 12 of them were over 40. I don't really believe they understood the technical aspects of it, the Bitcoin aspect of it. Of course, our witnesses were not allowed to explain it to them properly. And, as Roger Ver tweeted, he said, well, the government either doesn't understand Bitcoin or they're intentionally lying. The way they're describing it. And it was not a jury of Ross's peers in any sense. But that's the way it is now. And I think, personally, there's a certain amount of manipulation with it, but that's my personal opinion. I don't. So trials are a big, big risk. Out of the 3% that do go to trial, only 1% is exonerated.
Yeah.
That's a pretty small number.
It's a little bit shocking. I mean, and you encounter this anytime you sort of, at any level of government in this country, when people encounter the court system and encounter this sort of plea system, it's amazing the number of people who just, there's a form of blackmail here. It's like,
that's right.
Declare yourself guilty, save yourself time, money, and possibly an egregious sentence, and accept this lighter thing, which is awesome for you and the best you could possibly handle. And I've seen, even in petty traffic court, where I've been in several times, hundreds of people just marched, to the judge's bench and back again, like cattle. and agree to things they never did. And I must say, even I did this.
Who
It
wants
wasn't.
to hassle, right?
Yeah, I mean,
It's not like that.
I signed a paper saying something that I actually didn't do,
Wow, yeah.
so that I could get fewer points off my driving record and pay a smaller fine than I would have if I had challenged and so on and so on. And
Right.
at some point you just get exhausted and you're like, do you really want me to lie
Fine.
on this piece of paper? And you go, okay, and you get out of there. That's
Get off my back, yeah.
that's the American system. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, like I say, it wasn't what our founders intended.
No.
Was Ross offered a plea deal, and if so, do we know what it was and anything like that? Like, why didn't he take it other than trying to do the right thing? Is there any info
From what
on
I
that?
understand, and I'm not positive I'm saying this right, but I believe he was offered 10 years, except there was no ceiling, and it was up to the judge what the ceiling would be. So he still could get life, but then he wouldn't have the opportunity to prove things in trial. And so they were very anxious to have him plea at the beginning. They were really pushing it, apparently, but then they offered him that deal, which really it wasn't worth the risk, because we get a judge like we did, and there was no limit to what they could do. And so
When will we know the judges for the appeal?
I don't know when exactly. The next step in the appeal is the government will rebut the appeal. They'll have their arguments, and then the defense gets to answer that, and that's the end of the back and forth until, I guess, the judges can call for oral arguments. But an appeal can go. Well, this appeal could easily go way into 2017. So I'm not sure exactly when along the line the judges are chosen.
Will the government's response be public as well?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's all public.
And that'll be posted on your website too.
I hate to give them space on my website for their stuff. Frankly, it's all available on Pacer.
That's a good point.
I don't know. I just don't.
I understand.
I can barely read it myself, to be honest. It's just hard to read for me. And I don't know. Why should I give them space to make their arguments? It's kind of about.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We are an advocacy site for Ross. We're not, we don't have to be objective. I mean, we are being truthful, but we don't have to give equal time to them. They get so much time from the media and everything else. That's sort of how I look at it. Maybe that's wrong, but.
Well, you spoke at Liberty Forum. You've been doing these public hangouts. You're speaking at ISFLC this weekend. You're out and about. You're advocating for him. God bless you. Every mother, everybody who suffers in prison today should have such a mother. But I really do think that it's the only hope, because we're all in an awkward position, because Ross is by himself, is subject to this massive bureaucracy, alone most of the day, very little contact with anybody, only through the mails, and only for those people who happen to have the address, and only those pieces of mail that they push through. This is the most difficult trial for a person you could ever imagine.
There's worse. Go ahead. He was in solitary for 6 weeks. It's better than that, and so many people are in solitary. But anyway, it's difficult. It's horrible. Yeah, he's not allowed email like the other inmates because it was an internet crime, and he gets very bored because Ross is very intelligent, and he gets really bored. He is reading. He was till his books. He doesn't have his books right now, but he was studying artificial intelligence and physics and all things like that in prison to keep his. He likes it. He's learning that stuff and trying to, stay, mentally alive. But it's such a waste because Ross is so very original and creative and intelligent and really has a lot to give. And to, look, a life sentence, as I said in my speech, it's more than the 60 years Pablo Escobar got, and he was not only a real drug kingpin, but he was responsible, they say, for 3,000 homicides and 300 assassinations. I mean, that's in Wikipedia or something. I mean, I don't know for sure that's true, but apparently that was what he was being charged with, and he got 60 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, which just comparatively, double life plus 40 is a little more for, yeah.
Do you think that we'll be able to find out, especially now that, you know, there's a couple different corrupt agents, right? There's Sean Bridges, who just got in trouble. And then there's this story about Variety Jones, who is some high up on the Silk Road site, who claimed before they tried to arrest him in Thailand a few months before they found him, even though he had declared where he was, of course, in his posts. Basically, for people at home that don't know, Variety Jones was some guy who was on the Silk Road that said that there was a secret agent who was much higher up, or I guess, you know, had stolen a lot more money than those two agents that had been busted, that now had access to a Bitcoin wallet that had, I think, $84 million inside. And what he was planning on doing was kidnapping you and Ross's sister and videotaping it, and then getting a camera to Ross in prison to show him the video of the torture in order to get the password to the account so he could steal that other money. I mean, that's a really, really dangerous, scary accusation that to date I don't think has been addressed by law enforcement at all. I don't think that any kind of inquiries made by your legal team have gone answered by this. So it seems like there's a lot of evidence regarding this case that continues to be suppressed. Is there any way to put pressure on the system in order to have that revealed, or is this basically another thing that's going to be eaten by the bureaucracy?
I'm having trouble putting pressure on the system to visit Ross in prison. I mean, it's like putting pressure on the system. I don't know. I haven't really, you know, talked about that much with the lawyers. It's kind of separate from, you know, the trial and the appeal and all that. So I really don't know. My personal belief is that there could very well be more agents because they're hiding information. I mean, they won't decrypt or didn't decrypt the emails. They had information sealed, you know. So it seems pretty apparent, and they certainly didn't want the jury to know about this information at the time. But yeah, so it just seems logical that there's more to it that we don't know. And so
I just think as a citizen, we have the right to know these things. So it's,
yeah,
of course, on a long laundry list of things to be infuriated about. How can people participate and support Ross? What's the latest going on with that?
Well, you know, as Jeffrey was saying, you know, and by the way, the address is on our website. You can write him and things like that. And that's always uplifting for him, so he doesn't know he's alone. But you know, constantly need money. And and we have a really cool project that isn't just give me money. It's a game that Ross was inspired by a dream. He had this idea, and we developed out of that idea this game, which is, I don't know, Tatiana, you want to explain it? It's based on an artwork that Ross did called The Trial I Saw. So it's the trial from Ross's point of view, and it's quite a unique picture. It was done with a pencil and typing paper, because that's all he could have. And it's opaque. I mean, the picture's hidden under and then it's got a grid, and as people click on different squares of the grid, parts of the thing is revealed. And it's really turned into a cool thing where people are doing art on top of art because they're making designs and writing things with the squares. And each one costs $1. And all the money, 100%, goes to help fund Ross's appeal. And it's really been a fun thing to see transpire. And so, you know, you can have fun, don't have to spend a lot of money, and can really help us.
Well, who came up with this? This is absolutely brilliant. I'm playing it right now.
Basically, Ross did.
This is so wonderful. And it's $1 a pixel, so.
And
it was his idea, I should say. He didn't actually, you know, but in fact, Derek Slopey, who's a really great programmer, did the programming. I and his Aunt Kim and his dad kind of put it together, because, you know, but he's the one that gave us the idea. So.
Well, one of the cool things about it is, you know, we were, Lyn and I appeared on the Rebel Love Show, which is a program that's carried on LRN, in New Hampshire, and I had played the Ross song, Silk Road song, and then one of the gals was saying, as we were talking about the art project, is the importance of art in freedom and in activism, and how Ross's artwork was one thing, but the engagement that people have with revealing the messages is also artistic, because there's a heart, and then there's messages, different kinds of things where other people can participate. And I think it's a really unique, and despite the horror of the situation, a really beautiful way of engaging with the community. So if people go to freeross.org and they click on the art tab, they can see it, and already little parts of the picture are being revealed.
Yeah.
And Roberts and Roberts donated little gold, basically grams of
gold.
So if you click on it and you make your donation, not only can you put a message, but you could win a gram of gold. And I thought that was really nice of Tim and them to do that.
It's kind of scattered throughout. The other thing is you can leave a note. You can leave a message. There's all kinds of wonderful messages. So if you hover over someone's square, a message, and this was, something Ross came up with, you can, there's to be a message there, and we're going to send them all to him. He could, see those messages. So.
Another thing that I would really like people to do, we were up there and I was thinking, there's the problem in the libertarian community that people don't have money. And I think it's really important for people who are watching this show right now, if you don't feel like you could donate, although really even the price of a cup of coffee would be a huge help to the family, but tell people. Don't just post about it on Facebook, but engage your friends and family and educate them about what's going on. Send them to the site. If they're not readers, even though the Deep Web movie maybe didn't cover every single detail, I think it does an amazing job of showing the ethos behind the creation of the Silk Road. It shows a lot of the corrupt aspects of the trial, and I think it's also a really riveting movie. It's narrated by Keanu Reeves, and it's something that's a little bit more mainstream, because people might go to Free Ross site. Obviously we want to get Ross out, so we're going to give one perspective, but the documentary was excellent and it's riveting. When we were in Poland traveling together, people said that not only was it a good documentary, but it was engaging, and people wanted to know what would happen. Sometimes when you watch a documentary, you get bored. This was not boring at all. I mean, this was arguably the trial of the century. It's really, really a wild ride, and it's a good way to kind of educate other people about what's going on. And
we were thinking, actually his aunt came up with the idea, have a thing at your house where you show the movie and then people can discuss it, and hopefully everybody would throw in a little money. And you could have like that kind of Tupperware party model, all over the country. I mean, grassroots. With I'm hoping Students for Liberty, with all these students, that might be a way for them to do that, to spread the knowledge as well as help out. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money per person.
Hosting viewings at schools, I think, would be really great. And I don't know. I know that Lyn is really doing so much work, but even having Lyn join in for a Skype Q&A for some of them, I think
done that before.
Yeah, so that's like another option.
It's all about, lots of people over the last 10 years have come into the Liberty space and said, look, I believe in human liberty and there's a lot of injustice in the world. And they keep asking the question, what should I do? What can I do to make a difference? And this is an example of something you can do. I mean, there's no sure way to know that what you're doing is going to achieve his freedom, but everything you do helps contribute to making a heightening consciousness, and therefore increasing our prospects for a freer world, not just for Ross, but for the whole of humanity, because Ross's cause really is the cause of human liberty. They're all bound up together, so you can help Ross and help push the world towards being a freer place for everybody. That's why this case is important, why everybody should be involved in it. Well, Tatiana, I think we need to wrap it up because it's 9 o'clock, but I look forward to seeing, am I going to see you, Tatiana, at ISFLC?
You won't see me at ISFLC, but I have good news for you. You will see me in Texas at the State LP Convention, and guess who's going to be joining us? Yes, ladies and gentlemen,
Thanks for
Lyn
touching.
Ulbricht will be there with us in San Antonio
Live.
live. April 8th to the 10th, we're going to be down in San Antonio. So I was very happy to be a part of that. A lot of really great people, Julia Borowski, obviously Jeffrey Tucker, Lyn Ulbricht, and Bob Murphy, good friend of mine, also a big supporter. So it will be really great to catch up again. And I think, in the next month or so, we should certainly revisit with Lyn, see if there are any kind of updates on what's going on, and if people want to find out more, they can go to freeross.org. Please donate. Please tell your friends. Don't just depend on social media. Look at other people in the eye and tell them about this injustice.
And play the game, which is fun. I just played it.
So fun, absolutely.
I quickly spent $45. I mean, it's very
Jeffrey?
easy. Yeah, it's very easy to do because you want to see this beautiful picture by Ross. So this is brilliant.
Yeah, and wait till you see the picture. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. So it's awesome. Thank you so much, Lyn, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah,
Thank
see you
you for
soon.
everything you're doing. It's awesome for everybody.
You too. So. Both of you. Yeah.
And all the best, Tatiana. Bye-bye.
Bye.